Hi, everybody. This is Sophie. I'm the Professional Development Manager at English Australia. Thanks for coming along to this afternoon session and for taking the time out to focus on your wellbeing. I'd like to thank Oxford University Press for partnering with us to bring you the webinar today, and also thank our presenter, Sarah Mercer. Sarah's actually based in Vienna, where it's 9 a.m. in the morning, or in Austria, where it's 9 a.m. in the morning. So Sarah is a professor of foreign language teaching at the University of Graz in Austria, and she's the head of ELT methodology there. She's also the co-author of a book called Teacher Wellbeing, which is published by Oxford University Press. Thank you so much for coming along and presenting for us today, Sarah.
Thank you so much for asking me to come along. It's nice to be here. So, do I need to start sharing my screen?
Yeah.
Hold on. Let me get that up. A moment of blackness and then, okay, is that good? Can you see?
Yeah, perfect.
Excellent. Okay, welcome everybody. It's nice to be here. I spend my whole life telling people that I live in Austria, and then I have to say, no, Austria, not Australia. No, Austria, not Australia. And so it's quite funny to be in Australia, because then I actually go, no, I really am in Australia now. But living in Austria, it's one of the perils of being in a tiny country that nobody's ever heard of, and they mix it up continually with Australia. So we actually have T-shirts in Austria that say no kangaroos in Austria. Okay, we're going to talk today about your well-being. I'm assuming that many of you are teachers, some of you may also be managers, so I'm going to try and gear this to talk to both of you, to both sets of participants. The presentation that we've got here was one that we were originally supposed to be doing at IATEFL, and it came basically from the book that Sophie mentioned earlier, and when we put that together, of course it was written in what feels now like a completely different era. It was written in the time before the pandemic. But what we've discovered in revisiting the principles and the ideas in the book is that many of that is still very relevant now with slight adaptations for the current time. So I'm going to take you through that kind of thinking. I'm just going to open so that I can see the question box, because I'm going to have you doing a lot of chit chat. So I'm going to be hoping to interact with you a little bit and find out about your situation and what you're doing. So the first sort of thing to look at, hold on, I can't get my slides to go forward. Hold on, let's do it that way then. Oh, okay, there we go. Okay, so one of the things about the pandemic crisis is everybody's mental health has been affected by it. So it's not just some people, everybody is affected by it on the planet, and that makes that quite unique. It's quite a strange experience, but everybody responds very differently to it. So there isn't just sort of one type of response to this. It's different for everybody. I've been doing some other work at the moment, and basically what we're going through at the moment is sort of the dictionary definition of trauma. It's quite traumatic to have all the things that are familiar to you upended, all your certainty in life upended. And I know for some people, possibly here today, your existential issues in terms of job security and those kinds of things. So there's no doubt that what we're going through is an emotionally and stressful time, irrespective of the teaching. So not even talking yet about the teaching, just concentrating on how this feels to be living through this really strange time in history. So everybody's mental health is affected by it. That affects obviously learners and how they're coping and how they're dealing with things, but it also affects teachers and managers. It affects everybody basically. And one of the things that we need to do is we need to give ourselves permission to feel. This is a book by Brackett at Yale. And he talks about we need to allow ourselves to recognize and express these emotions. So can I just get you to express yourself in the comment box? What emotions are you going through at the moment? What are the different types of emotions that you're feeling at the moment? Maybe just if you can post something in the chat box. Tired, anger, am I doing enough? That's a good one. How can I make that bigger? Let me have a look. Fatigue, how can I make that bigger? Sophie, if you can make it bigger for me.
So there's a little square with an arrow through it, and if you click on that, it should undock it and make it bigger. Just next to where it says questions or
No, I can't make it bigger. The arrows just scroll through it, but they don't make it bigger. So I can only just about not even see one full line. There we go. I've clicked on it as if I want to reply. That makes it a little bit better. Oh no, that stops it, in fact. Okay, I don't know. I can't make it work. I'm sorry. Apologies to everybody. But I can see some of those things. Oh, that's interesting. Unusually upbeat. Right. So that's what's interesting about this is there's not just one way to do that. And it's quite interesting. The person who's written about being upbeat is there are a lot of negative emotions with this time, but also there's something called post-traumatic growth. And that when we have periods like this, which completely upend our normal lives, it does give us a chance to pause and take stock about what's important. And there is, not necessarily, but there is also the potential for what's known as post-traumatic growth. So that through this experience of what we're going through at the moment, that people take stock and say, I can find some meaning in this for me, and that maybe I'm going to make some lifestyle changes. Maybe this has sort of drawn my attention to things, and I'm going to maybe do some things a little bit differently. So permission to feel means there isn't one type of emotion. There's not one way of feeling about this. And whatever you feel, it's okay to feel that and give it space and to recognize it and to give yourself the chance to feel that emotion, whatever that happens to be for you at the moment. There's no one way of feeling about this. There's not a right way of feeling in this. One of the things I would want to say to you very explicitly is that if you are feeling fragile at the moment, so if you're feeling particularly fragile, and particularly maybe for people also whose job security is in question, but even for anybody who's just feeling that, you know, maybe with kids at home, several people in the household, obviously financial worries, all these, it's all just a bit much, please do reach out for help. It's okay to need help. We tend to be a little bit sort of, it's still a little bit taboo to talk about mental health and burnout, and it's a little bit squeamish. I think you guys in Australia are further on than we are here in Europe. But please do reach out. I've looked up Sane Australia, which is a mental health charity in Australia that does a lot of great work. I think you will probably know better than me. And I've also put the mental health charity from the UK that I'm familiar with, Mind, because they also have some great online resources if you wanted to work with them. So please, if you are feeling especially fragile, a 1-hour webinar isn't going to fix that. Please make sure that you reach out for professional help. Okay, so why do I think teacher wellbeing is so important? Well, this has become really kind of my life work in the last 5 to 10 years, I suppose. And I do research on this, and we're researching teachers at the moment and how they're experiencing their lives under the pandemic. But one of the things that always surprises me is that we're so late to the discussion about talking about why we want teachers to look after their well-being, why it's absolutely essential to good teaching. And first of all, they deserve it. Everybody deserves good well-being. Well-being is a basic human right. In fact, in the World Health Organization Charter, this is something everybody has the right to. So they deserve it, because everybody deserves well-being. But also we know from research that if you have high well-being as a teacher, you teach better, you have better relationships with your learners, usually fewer discipline problems as a result. Your teaching is more creative, you're more open to thinking about different ways of doing things. You tend to be a little bit braver, a little bit sort of more daring in the kind of teaching that you do. And ultimately, learners' achievement scores are higher. So teacher wellbeing makes sense for everybody. Everyone benefits when teachers flourish. So it's a mystery to me that it has taken us so long, for a whole host of reasons that I won't go into just now, but why it's taken us so long to put teacher wellbeing on the top of the agenda. It's great to see, and I had the discussion earlier with Sophie, and I've been learning about some of the fantastic work Australia, you guys have been doing in looking at learner wellbeing, and it's great to see that we need that balance to look at teacher wellbeing as well. I will also say that for those of you who are managers, so maybe DOSs or principals, school leaders, this applies just as much to school leaders as it does to teachers. And one of the reasons why we talk about the importance of the teacher or the manager and their well-being is that you are the emotional hub of your network. So if you think in terms of social networks, if you think like sociograms, what they look like, teachers are usually the hub. All the learners are connected to the teacher. In a school, the leader is connected to all the teachers and the teachers are connected to all the learners. It's like a sort of filter effect through the system. So if you're enjoying well-being, if you're positive, it's catching for others in your system. So it's not selfish to look after your well-being. It's absolutely essential to good practice. And so for me, I'm going to focus on learner and teacher well-being, but it applies to managers as well. Manager well-being is connected to teacher well-being, is connected to learner well-being. It's all part of the same ecosystem. In my view, if you're talking at the school level, we should be attending to the well-being of every single person who works in a school, whether it's the person who empties the bins in the office, or whether it's the person who's managing the whole school. Everybody's well-being matters. Okay, so we decided to work with an acronym, SMART. Of course, we had to have an acronym. So we decided to work with an acronym to help you remember the things that are important. It's a fraction of what's in the book, but we're just going to focus on, I pulled out the things that are perhaps most relevant at the moment. So we've got focus on self, focus on motivation, activity, relationships, and the concept of time. Okay, so let's begin by looking at self. Sometimes for teachers, we're very much working in an other-oriented profession. So we're very much used to looking at other people's needs, their wishes, what we can do to help them. And that's great. And we get a lot of meaning out of that. But we need to also put ourselves on the priority list. We need to make sure that we are paying attention to our well-being, looking after ourselves, making sure that we're doing okay. Particularly at the moment, we need to believe that, yes, we can. Many of us, myself included, have been on a very steep learning curve about suddenly teaching online. I had less than 24 hours to convert my teaching into online teaching, and it was all a bit chaotic. But I've learned a lot, and I'm still learning a lot every single day. My students are teaching me probably more than I'm teaching them at the moment. But self-efficacy is essential to teacher well-being. We need to feel that, yeah, we can cope with what we're doing, and we're good at what we're doing. And you can. And I can't stress this enough, you haven't forgotten how to be a teacher. You know how to be a teacher. You're still fantastic teachers, and I know that you'll be doing a great job. I know it. But sometimes this new space and the new technology and the new demands on us, it can sort of unnerve and unsettle our confidence in what we're doing. So don't forget all the things that you know that you can do. Work with your strengths. If you know that you're good, for example, at building relationships with learners, it's much more difficult to do online, but you can still do that in how you communicate with them, you interact. Build on your strengths, work with your strengths. We know from research that when you teach with your strengths, it gives you a positive boost. You actually have higher well-being. And self-compassion basically means be kind to yourself. So sometimes we're really tough on ourselves. And a nice way of thinking about this is a great researcher called Kirsten Neff, and she's written a book on self-compassion. And this is about when, if you treat yourself like you would treat your dearest friend. So if your dearest friend came to you and said, oh, I've had a rubbish day, my teaching was a disaster, this went wrong and that went wrong, you'd be really comforting and you'd say, oh, don't worry, you're a great teacher, and you'd be really kind to them. Be that kind to yourself. Sometimes we are actually tougher on ourselves than we would be on our friends. Be friends with yourself and be kind to yourself, be compassionate. I put this up there, I'll let you just read that and so you don't have to listen to me for a second. I think teachers are doing a fantastic job. I think teachers have earned an enormous amount of respect for just getting on with it. No training, no prep, no time, and very often no resources, and they're still making it happen. They're still connecting with learners, they're still doing what they can do best. They're still teaching, they're still supporting people who need them in terms of education. I think it's fantastic, and we need to not lose sight of that. At the moment, we've all gone back a little bit to being junior teachers. It's like being at the beginning of your career again, where you're not quite sure what you're doing and you're not confident and you can't easily predict what your lesson's going to look like because things happen that you didn't expect. Let go of the perfection. It doesn't matter. Just enjoy the learning, enjoy the creativity. For me, I've had some really fun experiences with the learners, things that you can't make this stuff up. I'll just tell you one story. I was teaching last week or the week before, and the students had control of the screen, and there was two of them, and they were presenting something, and they were teaching us. And then everything just went blank, and they disappeared, and everything just went off. And then they came back, and he was on his phone, and his mother was hoovering in the house and vacuumed over the cable and fused the entire house. All the Wi-Fi went, all the electricity went, everything went. You think you just couldn't make this stuff up, could you? So, and let go of the perfection. Just enjoy the experience. It's not forever, and look at what we can learn from this experience. Just enjoy the learning experience. And this is also something that I think we need to remember at the moment for our learners and for ourselves. Again, I'll let you read for a second. So this is the idea that less is more. We don't have to do everything 400 times over. We don't have to be doing more and more and more. Let go of perfection. Let go of trying to do everything. Focus on your well-being below productivity. This is the VIA character strengths model. For those of you who are familiar with this, there's a character survey that you can take, and we've all got strengths in these areas. So maybe your strength is humor, maybe it's a love of learning, maybe it's working in teams. So there are different kinds of character strengths, and we know that when we work with strengths, we tend to strengthen our sense of efficacy. We have more pleasure because we're working with something, a zone that we feel comfortable with. It doesn't mean we can't learn and stretch into new zones, but it's important to remind ourselves of our strengths. One of the things that I really want to encourage you to start embracing is something that maybe you guys know, because I know it's been used more in Australia, but it was new to me a couple of years ago, and I love it. Appreciative inquiry takes as a starting point sort of a little bit the opposite of action research. That action research starts with the notion of what is a problem, what are we struggling with, how can we improve it, we try new stuff out, you have that reflective cycle. Appreciative inquiry starts with what are we doing well here, what is functioning well, what is going well, where are our strengths, how can we build on that and do more of that? So how can we look at what's going well, why is it going well, what can we do more of that in different ways in different areas and build on that? So let me give you a second. Now, this is something that people sometimes get uncomfortable about, but we shouldn't be uncomfortable about saying that we're good at stuff, because we are. Everybody is good at something. So please just write in the comment box, what is one of your strengths? What are you good at? And trust me, it's okay to say that you're good at something. Tell us what you're good at. What are the things that you're good at? I can't really see the... I can't see the comment box, so I'm afraid I'm going to have to just guess. I can't, it's so annoying. Okay, there I can see a little bit. Humor. Humor's good. You definitely need that at the moment. That's definitely something that will help at the moment. Having a sense of humor will definitely be something useful. Everybody has strengths. Everybody has things. Mine is clearly not sorting out the Q&A box, but everybody has strengths and things that they are good at. And it's nice to remind yourselves of what these are, what you're good at, and be able to talk about that with your colleagues. When we do observations, very often if we're doing observations of teachers, we go and look at what they can improve. But why not just go and just have an observation session where you just tell them what they're doing brilliantly? Tell them what they're doing well. Tell them what is being successful, what they're enjoying and what's going well. So I'm having every technology fun today. Okay, so smart teachers. So now we'll move on to talk a little bit about motivation and your motivation as a teacher. It's easy. Motivation goes up and down. So one thing that we do know is about motivation is that we have dips and troughs, and that it's perfectly normal for your motivation to go up and down. Particularly at the moment, you'll have times when you're riding on an adrenaline rush where everything's going really well, you're really enjoying the challenge, you're enjoying what's going on, and then you have other times where you just think, I'm so weary with this, I just can't carry on. I need to have a little bit of breathing space, and it's perfectly okay to do that. One of the things that can be important, so if we work with the PERMA model, which I think some of you will probably be familiar with, particularly in Australia, the PERMA model of motivation looks at 5 pillars of well-being. There's 5 pillars of well-being. It's positive emotions, engagement, positive relationships, meaning, and accomplishment. And these things contribute to eudaimonic well-being. So our long-term sense of drawing meaning, being able to achieve our goals. And one of the things for us to remind ourselves of is sometimes we get so caught up in the day-to-day struggles that we can lose sight of what it is that made us become a teacher, why we became a teacher in the first place, what kind of meaning and purpose that we take from our jobs. And it's really useful to remind ourselves of that. And sometimes you might just have a little post-it note that you pop on your desk and just write down what it is you love about your job, why you took into the job in the first place, what meaning it gives you. And reminding yourself of that when you have a little bit of dip in your motivation is good, just to remind yourself of the big picture. Maybe give you a chance to write in the comment box. I'm sorry that I can't see, but if you can write in the comment box, what kind of meaning and purpose do you take from your job? What is it gives you meaning about what you do? What is it you love about the job that you really enjoy? I'm going to persevere and try and work out what I've tried every single.
Sarah, there's a little square with an arrow through it. If you can locate that, it should sort of disconnect the question panel from the dashboard and make it larger?
All I can see is there's an X, and then it says question, and then it says asker, and then there's a little triangle, and that's all I've got.
Okay.
I mean, I'm hoping that you guys can at least see each other and chat with each other. I'm really sorry that I can't interact with you in the way that I would like to, but at least I'm hoping that you guys can interact a little bit with each other and share some of these things.
So I can read some of them out if you like.
No, it's okay. I was just, if you, nothing else, literally there's nothing left for me to click on. No, I've clicked on every single box. There's nothing left for me to make it any bigger. Nothing will move. I can click on an individual one and then open it up to reply to it, but that's all. Okay. Okay, so I'm hoping that you guys can interact with each other. I do apologize that I can't interact with you, but I'll hopefully at the Q&A session at the end, Sophie will be able to read me any questions that you've got and anything that you want to talk about in that way. Okay. So this is a lovely quote. This I really like. I'll let you just read this for a moment. So when President Kennedy went to NASA, he spoke to the janitor and said, what's your role here? And he said, my job is to put a man on the moon, sir. And the reason that we put this quote in there is that it's really important sometimes to remind ourselves of the big picture. And I'm not sure what things that you put in the comment box, but things like drawing meaning out of our jobs as teachers, as language teachers, that as language teachers, we're contributing to global communication. We're enabling people to achieve goals, life goals. We're enabling people to broaden their minds. We're contributing, hopefully, to a greater tolerance and diversity. We're contributing to intercultural communication. So there's a big picture that we're making a really big difference on the planet, and what we do is important. Language teaching, in my view, is hugely important and can make a massive difference. So sometimes it's important not to lose sight of the big picture, but also the little things that we do. So the little everyday acts of kindness can make a profound difference to somebody else. One of the joys of being a teacher for me is that you can have these little interactions, you can have these day-to-day encounters, and it can make a big difference to the people that you're working with. What you do matters, and I think that's a hugely rewarding part of our jobs. And despite everything that's going on now, it's so important not to lose sight of that. And I'm going to just let you read this as well about how teachers are starting to be appreciated a little bit more, I hope. If I have one big wish after the pandemic, it's seeing how brilliantly teachers have adapted, have tried to do their best in all kinds of contexts and all kinds of teaching settings. I do hope that teaching as a profession and as a contribution to the education system are going to be valued more. Focus on the positives. You know the expression self-fulfilling prophecies, you get what you focus on. And basically, the reality of how we think as humans is whatever we divert our attention to, that is what that's our reality. Whatever we put our attention on, that is how we experience life. And that's just common sense. Whatever your attention is dedicated to, that's how you experience it. Those are the emotions. And so we can really make an effort to focus on the positives in life. Now, this is really important to note. It's not saying we deny and ignore and just pretend the negatives are not happening. That is not at all. And the thing we spoke about at the very beginning is about making sure that we give ourselves permission to feel the full palette of emotions, to recognize those emotions. But what this also means is we don't have to feed and foster the negative emotions. We can choose to focus on the positives. So humans are known to have what's known as the negative bias, the negativity bias, and we tend to focus on the negative. So I know for me, maybe you're not the same, but I know for me, if I could have a class with 24 students and 23 students say that was an awesome class there, I learned a lot, I really enjoyed it, thank you, and one student said, oh, I didn't think it was so great, I will obsess about that one person and completely ignore the other 23 people. So we do have a tendency to pick up on the negatives and to focus on those a little bit more. But that shapes our reality, and we need to sometimes train ourselves to look at the positives. And also at the time that we're going through at the moment, this is a difficult time. There's no question that it's emotionally stressful at the moment. But there are also positives in our day-to-day experiences. So it's learning to find those positives and focus on those. Whatever we put our attention on, that's how we're going to experience things. Now, one of the things that research has shown very clearly is gratitude practices are the one intervention that makes a massive impact on well-being. And without sounding like a bit of a new age hippie, I've been doing this for years, and it's one of the practices I swear by. Now, I have to confess, I can't do it in the morning. For some reason, in the morning, I'm not quite in gear enough to do this in the morning, but I can understand the logic behind this. It's the idea that you choose your mood. But I'll tell you what I do, and then you can sort of see how you could fit that in your schedule. Gratitude practices are about taking time in your day to just stop for a minute or two and think about what you're grateful and you're thankful for. And I do this at the end of every day before I go to sleep at night. I just take a minute or two and just think about what's happened during the day, what am I grateful for, what went well, what didn't happen that I'm glad didn't happen, and all those kinds of things at the end of my day. And this is kind of a way of training your brain to start to see the positives. So one night of sitting down and thinking what you're grateful for is not going to sort of suddenly impact your well-being. But what gratitude practices do is that it gets you into the habit of starting to see the positives in your day, the things to be grateful for, the silver linings in situations and so on. So if I could encourage you to take nothing else away from today's session but this, take away the habit of gratitude practices, thinking of something that you're grateful for in your day, something that you're thankful for. And that will help you to start ensuring that you're getting a little bit more of a positivity balance in your day. Another way to enhance the amount of positivity you have is something called savouring. I'll just let you read that, what savouring is. Okay, so basically savouring is that humans are really clever in that we can mentally time travel. So we are able to revisit experiences from our past and relive those positive experiences. We can direct our attention in the moment to things that we are savouring, that we're enjoying at the moment. And we can also look ahead to things that we're looking forward to, things that we want to do, things that we're excited about. And we can have anticipatory positive emotions about, oh, isn't it going to be great when I can do that again? I saw a lovely thing, an idea that I think it was a mum somewhere put online, that what she's done with her daughter is every time they say, I wish I could do whatever it is right now, they've got a jar, you know, like those pasta jars, those glass jars, and they've written it on a piece of paper and they've popped it in the jar, and they're going to do like a reverse bucket list. So all the things that they're missing at the moment, but they're really excited to do again, they write it on a piece of paper and they pop it in the jar. And when this is all over and they've got their freedoms back and they can travel and they can do the things that they would like to do again, they're going to take a piece of paper and they're going to make sure they do these things. And I think that's just such a lovely idea. I love that idea. And that's sort of advanced savouring. That's looking into the future, the things that you're really excited to do again. So when you savour something, you can savour a nice memory, something from the past. You can relive that positivity. Something that you're enjoying now, you can really take the time to appreciate it. And maybe something that you're looking forward to. Let me give you a second. If you can write in the comment box, what is something that you're really looking forward to doing again? What's something that you're really excited about being able to do again and that you're going to really savor when you can do it again? Like I say, I'm sorry that I can't see.
So lots of people have said travel, going out for a meal, going to the beach.
Yeah.
Meeting friends, cafes, seeing students face to face again.
Yeah, I know. I really miss the face-to-face teaching as well. That's something I really miss, being able to travel. I want to have a pizza that's not come out the freezer. I want a proper wood-baked, fresh pizza. That's what I've got a big thing about. And the beach, I've got a thing about, I read somewhere online, someone was talking about building sandcastles. And I haven't built a sandcastle since I was 4. But suddenly I've got this notion of that wet sand and building a sandcastle in a bucket, and I want to go and build a sandcastle now. So I've got this obsession about building a sandcastle. Not that we have a beach here in Austria, I hasten to add, as a landlocked country, but still. Okay, and the other thing you can do in your job, now don't forget, one of the reasons that in this webinar, one of the things that I want to stress is we're looking at things now in the here and now that can do to help you now. But the idea of the SMART approach to well-being is these are things that should also help you when you go back to normal, whatever normal will be after this experience. And so some of the strategies all the strategies I'm talking about today are things that I'm hoping you can start to adapt and bring into your lives generally. And the positivity portfolio is a lovely idea, is that for when we have those dips in motivation, what you can do is a positivity portfolio is when you get an email from a student who says, I love what you did in class, or thank you for doing this for me, or you get little notes or whatever it is, that you keep those in a place. And then when you have a little bit of a dip in your motivation, you go back and reread them. And it's just a way of reminding yourself of the positive experiences you've had, the students you've encountered that you've had positive relationships with, that kind of reconnection with that positivity. Okay, the A is for activity. We do not have bodies, we are bodies. And this is something called the health triangle. Now look, let me make this perfectly clear. I am not the person to lecture anybody on health. So I'm not lecturing you here. I'm not at all here to tell you what you should do in terms of nutrition and exercise. I'm probably the last person who should be allowed to talk about that. But then the well-being triangle is that we have got three things that contribute strongly to our physical well-being, and understanding that physical and mental well-being are very tightly connected is really important. So the quality of our sleep, do we pay attention about our sleeping hours? Very often when we're overworked, one of the first things that disappears is our sleep. So we cut down, like, oh, I'll go a bit later, I'll get up a bit earlier. Making sure we protect our sleep, the quality and length of our sleep. Nutrition, making sure that we have healthy eating. I don't think personally a little indulgence here and there is anything to worry about. But generally, whatever you put in your body is the energy that you draw from. So you want to be putting quality stuff in and you get quality energy out. And we all know that exercise releases positive chemicals in the brain, is actually good for our well-being. So being able to attend to these three things in whatever way, everybody's different and everybody's needs to attend to these vary. But all I would like to suggest is think about that health triangle and think about what aspects, what are you paying attention to? Is there something more that you could be doing in one of those areas? Maybe you want to comment about what you were able to, I think in Australia, you guys were allowed out again. Is that right? Are you guys allowed back out to do stuff? I think.
So we haven't been probably locked down as much as you have, but people are still really encouraged to stay at home at the moment.
Okay, because we've been properly locked down, and so you have to get a little bit creative about your exercise options. We're allowed out now to do walking if we don't have to drive to it. We can do it locally. But what have you got some ideas about what you've been doing for exercise? What kind of exercise options you've got? Anybody want to comment on things that they've been doing? I've been doing some, a woman online, she's called, I don't know, I've forgotten what her name is, and she does walking, so you can walk in your living room. So I've been doing some of that, which has been fun to do.
So we've got Pilates, skipping, all my kids' trampoline, online yoga poses, gardening.
Okay. Gardening, yes, I've been doing my gardening. In fact, my garden has never looked quite so spruce as it does just now, I have to say. It's had more attention than it's ever had. Being outdoors is really important. So there's a fantastic book called The Nature Fix by a woman called Florence Williams. And what she explains is that societies have urbanized quicker than human bodies have been able to adapt. And we get an enormous amount of positivity from being in nature, being in wildlife, connecting, seeing the trees, seeing plants. That's why even having plants in your office can make quite a big difference to your well-being. So finding time to go in nature, be in nature, do some exercise. And one of the other things that I also am not particularly good at, but I'm learning, is the idea of mindfulness. So being able to take time, regulate your breathing, be in the moment and kind of free your mind a little bit. I recommended a book here because I'm not particularly good at this, I have to admit, but Ruby Wax has a great book called Travel. And really it's with a lot of humor, but tells you about the importance of mindfulness. And she's got very sort of practical ways of finding your way into it. But being able to give yourself that little bit of space, mental space, being able to regulate your breathing, calm yourself down, being able to look at that in a way. But I want to emphasize this. Stop shoulding yourself. So when we talk about physical well-being, we all get into this, I should be doing more of this, I'm not doing enough exercise, I'm not eating enough of this, don't should yourself. That just adds to your stress. And the last thing I want to do today is prescribe how you should be living your life and actually make things worse. What you need to do is, these are things we know about, you can be aware of, you do what you can to the degree that you can, when you want and how you want it. There's no sort of prescribed way of doing this, so don't should yourself about this. Activities, also hobbies. So sometimes people have found now that they've made time to be creative, to build things, make things, learn new things, read, write, paint things, sculpt. Anybody know who this guy is? Anybody know? I can't see, but you can type in the comment box, but maybe Sophie, you can shout out if you can see any.
Mozart?
No, good guess because I'm
Newton?
Yeah, Newton. Newton. It's Sir Isaac Newton. Brackett. It does look, they all look the same with that hair, right? Sir Isaac Newton apparently created the theory of relativity during the plague when he was trapped at home. But there's no pressure to perform. So there's this idea that, oh, I should be doing this and I should be doing more of that should stuff. Get rid of the should. If you hear yourself saying should, stop yourself. There's no sense of should. But one of the things about activity is having hobbies. So we know from research that teachers benefit enormously when they have something that is completely unrelated to their work that they can devote themselves to. So having hobbies, finding things to do that you enjoy that can completely take you away from work for a period of time, just empty your mind for a moment of time. It can be creative, it can be learning something else, but having hobbies is hugely important. What are some of the things that you do to kind of recharge your batteries? What are some of your hobbies, things that you do to get away from work and recharge? What are some of the things that you do? Gardening, obviously, I've commented is one of mine.
We've got writing, reading biographies, Zoom choirs, dancing, cool. Netflix, painting and drawing.
Oh, very nice, very creative. It's very good to be able to find some kind of outlet, something that is not related to your teaching that gives you a little bit of space, a little bit of time to be doing something else. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to move on and look at relationships. Social connection, positive social connection is hugely important to us. We are social beings. Humans are fundamentally very social. And fostering those relationships, working on relationships is a hugely important part of strengthening our well-being. We talk about social distancing. I'm not the first person to say this. Many people have commented that this is completely the wrong term. We should be socially close during this time, but physically distant. So what we're concentrating on is how can we connect with other people? I've never had so much contact with my family in the UK. We've had FaceTime sessions, we've had Zoom parties, we've never had so much connection. Somebody before said a Zoom choir. How fantastic is that? So finding online community, and if you haven't got it, create it. Maybe it's a book club online. I'll confess that my friend and I, we usually meet to talk about books every so often, so we've now converted this to wine online. So we have a glass of wine and talk about books every couple of weeks. So finding some way of socially connecting with others. We need that kind of social support. We need to be able to talk things through. It's okay sometimes to have a little bit of a whinge about stuff. It's healthy to have a little bit of a complain and talk about, get things off your chest. But it's good to be able to talk about other things and have distractions and just be able to be together with other people in a very positive way. You know, arrange a cup of tea and have a virtual catch up with somebody you know is good for you and for your mental health. Or as I confessed, my friend and I have the wine online session. Remember that relationships don't just happen, they're built. And this is important. We know about this when we're talking about the relationships we build with learners, we know this. But also in the workplace and in our families, relationships require effort and investment. And particularly at the moment, everybody is feeling, everyone's feeling a little fraught, everyone's feeling a little stressed. It's an unusual situation for everybody. Empathy goes a long way at the moment for everyone. But remember that relationships aren't effortless. They do require some investment. Maybe you have a range of strategies of what you can do to, you know, protect your personal relationships. I'm thinking also of the time before and after the pandemic that we really invest in our personal relationships. Sometimes we take for granted people who are close to us because they're close to us and because they're always there. And actually, they're the people that we should be devoting a little bit of time and attention to. We can get so caught up in our work that we sometimes lose sight of people and they need to be with us. So spending quality time together. Quality time means not both sat on your phones or sat together, but really actually being together, doing something together, and really being in that moment. So I'm very fastidious about banning mobile phones and any kind of digital devices from the dinner table. That's the time, that's quality time together where we talk, where we are fully in the moment with each other. And you can find different ways of doing this that work for you and your partners or your family or your friends, but really being with each other and making sure that the time together is of quality. Work on communication. Listen and talk more. My goodness, you know that teachers, we're kind of well known for this. We talk more than we listen. Make sure that when you're communicating in a relationship, we need to learn to really listen. Listen to what the person's telling us. Give them space to express themselves. Investing energy and time in the relationship, but also allowing each other space. So one of the things I know that at the moment can be a strain is that when everybody's in the house together and you're all kind of on top of each other, it's great to have that social support with each other and be there for each other. But sometimes you need to be able to say, I just need a little bit of space on my own without taking offense. We'd be able to have that open communication. Try perspective switching, so developing empathy. How are they experiencing? What are their needs? So really sometimes taking stock and saying, okay, this is how I feel. How might he or she feel? What might their needs be? How can I be there for them? And the triple A's you may have heard of before. The triple A's for your partner is they need affection, they need appreciation, they need attention. We all need that. And I also think that applies as much as it does in the workplace as it does at home, that people need to feel appreciated. They need you to pay attention to them, to invest and be interested in them as individuals. So relationships are things that we have to work at, but we get a lot of positivity out of them. So we invest in them, but the quality of those relationships comes back to us tenfold. And this is the great advice for better communication in relationships. We have two ears and one mouth, so we can listen twice as much as we speak. Something that I should actually put on my forehead, I think, to remind me. Okay, and the last one, very conveniently, knowing that the notion of time is thinking about time. I'm going to let you read this. You might know this, so don't give the party line away if you do. Have a little think that you've got all this, and what would you do? What would you spend it on? You possibly know this already. It's actually time. It's the amount of seconds you get in every day. And we don't get that time back. We can't keep it. So when you have a day, how you spend it, it's gone. You can't reserve it for later. You can't stockpile it. You can't get more of it. It goes and it's gone and it's spent. And so how we spend our time is how we create our lives. And so making sure that we are using our time wisely, that we're not wasting it as we would waste money, that we don't waste our time, that we think about how we're using our time. It doesn't mean you have to use every second of every day for productivity, but it means that you think about where your priorities are in life and how you're spending your time, and do they match up? So if we're spending our time on things that are actually not part of our priorities and are not massively important to us, somehow there's a little bit of a discrepancy there. So thinking about what is important to us, what are my priorities, what matters to me really in life now and in the long term, and then looking at how we're spending our time and saying, do those two things match up? Am I spending my time in ways that reflect my priorities and that reflect what's important to me? And the paradox of time right now is that we have, of course, very blurry boundaries. Teachers have this anyway, so very often teachers also have blurry boundaries to weekends and evenings. You tend to work into an evening. So for most teachers and also managers, it's not just the hours that you're at the school when you're actually doing your teaching that's part of your job, but that spills out all over the place. And at the moment, that has, of course, become even more difficult. So working from home, most teachers, myself included, you have problems in terms of creating time boundaries. So being able to say, okay, now stop or start, but also in terms of physical boundaries. So it sneaks into all parts of the house. So making sure that you create some kind of physical or temporal boundaries to your work so that it doesn't just completely and utterly take over your life. You need to be able to create some kind of space. The spillover crossover model is that when you have spillover into different areas of your life, there is emotional contagion. So we bring our emotions from work home, and that does tend to influence, and it influences us, and then it's the relationships we have with our kids, our partners, all of that is connected. So the paradox of time now is we seem to have so much time, but actually, I don't know about you guys, but my work has expanded to fill any kind of spare time that I thought I would have had. If you had told me that I would be able to work from home and I'd imagine that I have all this extra time, but in fact, that's not actually what's happened at all. My time has evaporated and I seem to have less time, or what time I do have, I don't seem to be using quite as efficiently. So time is all about work-life balance. Can you maybe imagine why I really don't like the notion of work-life balance? maybe you can think about why. I have a bit of a thing about that phrase. I don't really like it. Work-life balance is for me a complete misnomer, and I use it because people are familiar with the notion. But the reason it's a bit of a problematic notion for me is that work-life, it suggests that they're two separate things. You have one life and it contains work and non-work. So that's the first thing to understand, is that we have one life and we only have one life. Well, I assume we only have one life. And in that life, we have to bring together parts of our work life, but also parts of our personal life, our free time life, the different parts of our lives that come together in our one life. And I've taken the word that Claire Fox uses. She talks about symbiosis. And I prefer this to balance, because balance suggests there's some kind of perfect equilibrium that you can strike. And first of all, it's dynamic, it changes. So sometimes I have it under control, sometimes it's out of control. And sometimes balance suggests that there's some kind of perfect equilibrium or ratio for everybody, and that's very individual. So somebody who maybe has family commitments or carer commitments has got a very different set of needs to somebody who maybe is an individual who's got no other commitments in their life. So there is no one way of doing this. It's very personal, it's very individual. But what we all have is we all have aspects of work and non-work that we have to somehow integrate in our lives. And we have to find a way to do that that allows both space and means that one doesn't get ignored at the cost of the other. Parkinson's law, you may have heard of, work expands the time to fill the time that you make available for it. So if you say that you've got 3 hours for lesson planning, it will take 3 hours. If you say, realistically, look at your lesson planning and say, I can probably get that done if I'm intense in an hour and a half, you will get it done in an hour and a half. So particularly with lesson planning, there is a point of there's a point where there's no return on your investment. So up to a certain point in the scale, the amount of work that you put, the amount of effort that you put into lesson planning reflects in the kind of learning outcomes and the kind of gains in terms of quality of your teaching. But then there's a point at which you're just faffing, you're just adding details and things, and it's not really making a difference to the quality of learning or the quality of interaction in your teaching. So you have to find that balance of where you say, okay, it's enough, and be able to stop your planning and your prep and say, it's enough. Anything beyond this is not actually going to lead to a quality impact or change. Creating boundaries between work and personal and allocating time for both. So particularly now, but also in life before and after the pandemic, you have to make sure that sometimes you have to schedule time for family and friends and for leisure. And you might find that you're getting such a spillover that you're not creating the kind of space that you need to have time for both. And it's about setting priorities. And sometimes, maybe this is something that I've already discovered. We're doing some research at the moment with teachers during the pandemic, is quite a few teachers we've been speaking to have been taking stock of what their priorities are. And this kind of global crisis is a sort of thing that prompts you to reflect on what your priorities are, how you're spending your time. And maybe this is the time where you start to reflect on the kind of lifestyle changes that you might want to make, or you actually recognize that I'm quite happy with how I'm managing things and this is working well for me at the moment. So what are your time management tips? I love asking teachers this, because teachers have usually got great ideas for this. Perhaps you can share some of your time management tips. How do you, oh, this is important to stress. Time management is not so you can work more. Don't get me wrong, that's not the point of time management. Time management is so that you can work more efficiently and create more time for leisure and for the other parts of your lives. So don't misunderstand effective time management as being, oh, I can do even more work now. That's not what it's about. Effective time management is to do the work you have to do efficiently so that you can create more time for your leisure and for your non-work life. So perhaps you can share some of your time management tips. What ideas do you have, or how do you manage your time effectively, particularly at the moment where I'm finding that it's really hard to keep track of things? Bless you. Sophie, can you read me any, or can you see?
Yeah, sure. So someone said by giving themselves an amount of time to lesson prep and saying, okay, that's enough now.
Yeah, there's actually a strategy called time boxing. So time boxing is where you literally say, you have to be realistic. So you have to look at what it is you need to do. Say, it's going to take me roughly that amount of time. And then you really put your clock on it and you stick to that time, and you don't let it sort of, because otherwise Parkinson's law will just go on and on and on.
Yep, there's also prioritizing tasks,
Yeah.
Being okay with letting some things go, having a shorter to-do list.
Yeah, yeah. And it goes back to some of the things earlier where we also said, you know, let go perfection. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's got to be good enough. And sometimes knowing when it's good enough is a great way to keep your focus.
Someone uses the Pomodoro technique.
Okay.
Francesco Cirillo.
Okay, so I'm not sure if, I think I have that on my list here. So the Pomodoro technique is where you give yourself intense bursts of work. So it came from, you know, those what they called like I can't find my English words now, timer. And it's the shape of a tomato. And this guy did it while he was studying. And he found that he would set himself 10 minutes of intense work, and then he'd give himself 2 minutes to do something else. So 10 minutes of intense work and 2 minutes to do something else. So really boxing your time and working intensely. And then after about 3 or 4 repeats of that, I think it is, he then does a big break of sort of 20 minutes and goes out and does something completely different. So you have to kind of get up and change your space. So it's about sort of creating intense periods of time where you avoid distractions. So when you've got multiple things going at the same time, we know that people basically don't work very efficiently or effectively when you're multitasking. So really, one of the things that the Pomodoro technique is good for is it's really about focusing on what you need to do and doing just that intensively, and then giving yourself a bit of breathing space to refresh and then come back. I have to say, particularly for things like teaching prep, some people can get into a state of flow. So flow is where you're so enjoying it, you're so into it, you're enjoying the creativity of designing something that you can lose track of time a little bit. And there are also positive moments to be taken out of that if you're enjoying the sense of flow. So be realistic about your workload expectations, setting boundaries to weekends and evenings, really allocating free time to yourself, making sure that you fix that. Fixing time for your hobbies, sports, family, friends, time boxing, which is what somebody else spoke about earlier. Let go perfection. It doesn't have to be perfect. It has to be good enough. Learning to say no. So remember that when you say no to one thing, it's allowing you to say yes to something else. So saying no to something is not being unkind, assuming that you do it in a nice way, but saying no is not being unkind. Saying no is protecting yourself and allowing yourself the opportunity to say yes to something else that perhaps is going to be more important. And thinking about your priorities, thinking about how these things, how you're spending your time is matching your priorities. So the smart teachers sort of ask yourself, are you being kind to yourself? Attending to yourself, being compassionate with yourself, letting go perfection, being kind to yourself, recognizing your strengths and what you're doing well. Helping yourself to keep track of the positives, things that you're positive about your job, things on a day-to-day basis, the positives that you see in your life, not losing track of the positives in the midst of some of the negativity. Thinking about what you can do that gives you a boost, whether that is a physical boost, physical activity, or whether it's some kind of hobby, some kind of distraction, some way of being something else completely away from work. Thinking about relationships, what relationships are important to you and how can you invest in them? What things matter to you? Who do you want to invest in your relationship? Who do you want to spend time with? And how can you manage your time for balance? And I'm using the word balance in a sense of finding that inner sense of equilibrium, a sense of peace, that you find that you're managing your time in a way that allows you to do your work, but also have time for family and for friends and for your leisure activities. And these are strategies that I hope are going to help you manage the intense period of time that we're going through now, but also strategies that we can take with us forward, looking to the future, looking to whatever normality turns out to be, and that we still keep an eye on our well-being, that we still make ourselves a priority, and that we understand that doing that is not selfish, it's not an indulgence, it's an absolute essential part of being good at my job, means that I'm looking after myself so that I'm in the best place to be the best version of myself professionally. So become smart, stay smart. Please develop these smart habits during the pandemic and keep them afterwards. And above all, please stay safe and healthy. And thank you guys for having me join you today. Thank you. And I think I've even left 5 minutes for questions.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, if people do have questions, please type them in.
I'm going to need you, Sophie, to read them because I can't see them.
Of course. Yeah. So there was one question that came up already, which was, what would your one go-to daily piece of advice be to stay positive during this time? And you mentioned the gratitude.
Yeah, definitely the gratitude practices, and because one, there's bags of research to back that up. That's not just my opinion, but it trains your mind to start seeing the positives. So when I first started doing it, it is something you have to make an effort for. So when I first started doing it, I had to think, okay, what am I grateful for? I'm happy that this happened today. I enjoyed that conversation. I'm happy I didn't crash my car. You know, I had to think about it. And now at the end of the day, I find my mind is flooded with lots of ideas. So it is literally a habit of mind that you can help yourself to find the positives. And, you know, whether it's something small, like you look outside and there's, you know, I've got a bird feeder outside with birds on, and I take a bit of pleasure from looking at them, and I'm glad that nature is carrying on and that that's not been affected in this way. And so it is something you need to work at a little bit at the beginning, but it does become a habit of mind, and then it makes finding positive things a lot easier. And there are a lot of negatives at the moment, but there's also a lot of positives. I'm very, very cautious, and this is something I think I would very much advise, is monitor your media intake. And that refers to reading newspapers, watching the news. At the beginning, I was watching all the news and paying attention to everything, and then I could sense that it was becoming too much for me. And so I literally I'd watch one in the morning and one in the evening, and that's it. And I don't look at the news or any kind of media during the day at all, because I need to free my mind of it, and I need to be, dare I say, normal for a while and just kind of forget about that. So I would also add that to the positivity thing, is about monitoring your media intake, and also ensuring that you go to websites like the Good News Network and things like that and look at some of the positive stories coming out of this as well.
Okay, great. Somebody has just asked what you teach. What's your professional background?
Okay, so I started language teaching. I taught language. I taught as an assistant in school, and then I taught English at the university. So I taught English. Obviously, I'm in Austria, so where the mother tongue is German. So I taught English for many, many years at university, and now I've moved over into teacher education. I've got one language class left, but everything else that I do is I'm in charge of the teacher education program. And I have to admit that the one language class I have left is with teachers, so we do a lot of also teacher training in that. So I've moved more from language teaching to teacher education, but I still consider myself a teacher.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? If anybody's got any questions, you know, something might occur to you afterwards that you have a little bit to think about, and you think, oh, I wish I'd asked her that, or I'd like to ask her about that, please do drop me an email. It's no problem at all. I'm happy to be in touch via email.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think that's it for the questions.
Brilliant.
I'm just going to get my screen back up. Okay, so yeah, once again, Sarah, I'd just like to say thank you very much to you for coming along to present for us. I think one of the real positives that's come out of this time has been the ability for people to focus on their well-being, and for people to really focus on putting some of these strategies in place that you're talking about, which we know, you know, are long-standing strategies in psychology, but I think it's been a real opportunity during this time to really focus on them and hopefully move forward with them in the future. So thank you for sharing all of those strategies, and for your book recommendations as well. I'm really interested to go off and read Frazzled now. So thank you once again. Thanks also to Oxford University Press for partnering with us to bring everybody this webinar tonight. And just before we go, I wanted to just give a quick plug to the English Australia Mental Health Special Interest Group. You can join that group's Facebook group via this link that's displayed now. And this is really a group that's focusing, initially it focused on student mental health, but throughout this period, it's really morphed into being student and teacher wellbeing and mental health. So please join the conversation there around these issues. Thanks everybody for coming as well.
Thank you so much, Sophie. Thank you everyone for coming, and thank you for hosting us. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.